after driving 750 kilometers north of the Iberian Peninsula, my friend and I knew that we would have to confront this ballot box. Every Friday, only 5 people win the chance to visit the mysterious cave of Altamira. 5 names are picked up from this ballot. We knew well before we set off that our chances were bleak, as we had to compete with over 50 people equally keen. We were not lucky, and we had to console ourselves with the replica of the cave. However, I must clarify that all these images that I'm showing here are not of the replica, but of the real thing. And the great majority of these excellent photographs of the frescoes were taken by the photographer Pedro Saura. Here you can see the royal family inaugurating the replica, which is certainly magnificent. But if you compare the images of the replica to the images of the real thing, then, of course, there is no comparison. The frescoes on the ceilings of the cave date from more than 14,000 years ago. CO2 is the main enemy of the frescoes. Apparently, a dry atmosphere could reduce the images to sawdust. The paintings need constant humidity to survive, hence the restrictions for visitors. According to scientists, this is a replica of the entrance, as it was before it collapsed 10,000 years ago. It is facing north, and therefore the light was very steady. Even today, northern light is the best for the painter. Although there were plenty of rock surfaces near the light, the artists chose to paint their animals in the most hidden corners of the cave. In recent years, the cave was excavated and the floor was lowered considerably to allow the visitors a better view of the frescoes. But the scenery of our ancestors had very low ceilings. Our artist would have had to lie down on the floor with hardly any room to move. Experts mentioned a height of up to 80 centimeters. There was also darkness, so he or she had to light the space with an oil lamp or paint in the darkness from memory. Whichever way, it is clear that the artist wanted to give privacy to the images. I dread to think how did they keep the pigment wet? Or how did they not set themselves on fire with the oil lamp so close to their bodies to be able to see what they were painting? Needless to say that after every session they must have been totally covered in paint. Why were these images placed in such private corners of the cave? Only a maximum of 2 people at once could be admiring them, lying on the floor, and with the help of an oil lamp. There are many hypotheses about shamans, about religious ceremonies, about worshipping the animals, etc. But the only thing we know for sure is that there was a need of privacy when the images were looked at. We also know that the bison are resting in the great majority of the images. We know that they did not want natural light, so it was either to imagine the images in the darkness or to see them with all the shadows produced by the lantern, which incidentally it must have been truly spectacular, given the height of up to 80 centimeters in many cases. The light of a lantern is very soft and it flickers, giving an effect of movement. But let's go back to the subject matter. Most of the bulls and bison seem to be resting peacefully. There is no sign of aggression whatsoever. Peaceful bulls, hinds and horses, a female bison on heat, and a large female hind, they seem to inhabit the picture plane of the entire canvas. The female bison on heat, you can see here in this drawing from the original, done in the late 30s by the well-known archaeologist Ab Henry Bruy, who was one of the first to study this cave. The photograph of the same image was taken by Pedro Saura. This other female is a pregnant hind. She is 2 meters 25 centimeters long. Again, The first photograph is by Pere Saura, the second by another competent photographer whose name, I'm afraid, I do not know. Notice how different the images are. The eye of the camera is far from exact. My question here is, why is the pregnant hind so huge? Maternity was obviously very important. Then there are the half-human, half-animal images, very few in number, and some of them lost when a middle ceiling in Gallery 5 collapsed. It is quite common in this period to find images of human beings portrayed as half-animals. However, compared to the images of animals, they are few and far between, and they are never superimposed onto other images. I have always been fascinated by this image, found at the caves of Lascaux in France. The image is placed quite separate from the very many images of animals, as if it has a particular and special meaning. My reading is that the human is about to die. He has made a terrible mistake. His spear has ripped open the womb of a pregnant female bison, and the fetus is coming out. The warrior knows his mistake and abandons himself to his fate, open arm. He is wearing a bird-like mask. Perhaps if the beast kills him, he can recover his soul that is already on top of a spear, ready to fly away. Next to them, a rhinoceros is peacefully defecating. Life goes on. I will come back to this later. This image here, drawn again by the French abbot in 1935, shows a reduced sketch of a very interesting image. The abbot says, "This frieze of finger drawings, made with 3, 4 or 5 fingers, tracing simultaneously, is incomprehensible at first sight. So great is the mass of complicated interlacings, but a more careful examination led to a deciphering, on the narrowest side of a very beautiful head of a primitive bull measuring 1 meter 20 centimeters in length, inclusive of the existing part of the neck. There is only one horn. The nostril and eye are visible, and an ear, though this is less clear. More to the right," he quotes figure 37, "there are parts of another head in profile. A little older, an eye and the face. Towards the center of the panel, there are probably 2 or 3 other heads, less decipherable. One with a big arch muscle and an erect ear, the other with 2 unequal horns. Towards the end of the frieze is an engraved hat, like those on the big ceiling, and various other incised lines, one cutting across a line drawn by a finger." End of quote. I enclose a sample of the mentioned hats. In modern times, the so-called automatism in painting, or rather the act of making marks using the unconscious, could be used here as a way to start a painting. The artist is drawing freely with his or her fingers, and then images emerge from the created mud lines. What follows are the humanoids on the walls of Altamira, drawn as well by the abbot. Notice that they have also a bird-like head, like the one at Lascaux. And this one has perhaps wings and a fish-like tail. I believe this bird-like head is very important, as I will explain in a moment. 2 of them have an erected penis, and in the case of this one, the phallus is in relief. Another very enigmatic thing are the geometric images found in the cave. They interest me particularly, and I will explain why. Here I quote José Antonio Las Heras, director of the museum next to the Altamira cave. He says, "Towards the interior of the cave, at about 65 meters from the mouth, a big blind gallery is found, full of red signs. This small space, of little more than a meter width and 5 meters length, has at the top a sign composed of 4 irregular internally divided ovals. Halfway up on the interior face of one ledge is a large sign which reaches a length of 3 meters and up to 50 centimeters width. It is formed of large bands of parallel lines crossed by small transverse strokes. In order to see it, it is necessary to bend down and even lie down on the floor to appreciate it in its entirety. The narrowness of the space makes the contemplation of these and other signs, which are on one of the walls, difficult, and does not allow the simultaneous presence of more than 2 people, which makes one reflect upon its function or original use. End of quote. So, once again, there is this need of privacy, which seems to be a main issue with all the images in this cave. Also, I think it is important to mention that this particular red image, whatever this pattern represents, it is trying to protrude the rock, as if it wants to enter the inside of the mass. Most of these caves have rock formations that resemble human vaginas, as if the cave itself is a living womb. Caves resemble the entrails of Mother Earth. I remember clearly when I was walking inside the cave of Las Monedas, or Tito Bustillo, also in the north of the peninsula, that I had the strong feeling that I was walking inside a living womb. Also, the vacuum of its depth and high ceilings created a weird sound, which reminded me of an exhibit at the National History Museum here in London a while ago. They reproduced the noises that a human fetus was hearing while inside of his mother's womb. Let's go back to the cave. These images here in black seem to be doing the same thing than the red sign. The geometric patterns are heading towards the join, towards the clitoris of the massive womb. They are returning to the ground, where life emerges, but with a conscience, to acquire bigger power. As crazy as this might sound, in my view, these geometric images are wings. Let's remember that as far back as the 9th century, Abbas ibn Firnas, a Berber born in Cordoba, attempted to fly. That is 6 centuries before Leonardo da Vinci. And apparently he managed to remain in the sky quite a while before being forced to an unsuccessful landing that crippled him. The prehistoric ancestor had few resources, but an enormous imagination. To build something similar to Firnas was not impossible. It only required a belief that luck would be by his side. Where better than the entrails of the earth to look for reassurance? The man in Lascaux has a bird-like head, and so did the ones in Altamira. They are not unique. I gather the biggest quality of a bird is the fact that it can fly. In my view, the prehistoric human greatest quality was directness. He or she could not afford to make mistakes. What were the beliefs of our ancestors, we don't know, but we have images that could be studied from different disciplines and maybe get closer to a better understanding of the past.